Thank you. I really enjoy your applause, but this is going to be the first of my many scoldings today. We really don't want a lot of applause, as much good as it sounded to me. But thank you all very much for being here today. Thank you for your incredible interest, as always, in New Hampshire and the issues which concern us all. Now, as you may have noticed by reading your morning papers, Congress and AARP have thoughtfully conspired to provide us with a very interesting way of having this conversation today. And we will be having a lot of questions. I will tell you in a moment about what the format is, but first I want to introduce you to all of the candidates who want to be your next president. Please hold your applause until I've introduced them all, and then you can go crazy. First, Senator Joseph Lieberman of Connecticut. Oh, that's right, I said you couldn't applaud. General Wesley Clark, the former NATO Supreme Allied Commander. Representative Richard Gephardt from Missouri. Senator John Edwards from North Carolina. Governor Howard Dean from Vermont. And who have I left out? And Senator John Kerry from Massachusetts. Now you can applaud. I have to say I'm not used to such an obedient audience, but it must be a PBS crowd. The format today is simple. 1 minute opening statements from each candidate, and then they will answer questions directed from me and from some of you in the audience, also to which they will have 1 minute replies. Now, this is where I get to scold, not only you, but also the candidates, because they have a way of getting carried away, if you've been watching these debates. We would really like to get to as much as possible, and if we can, to keep it to those 1 minute. And then after we've had questions from me, questions from you, then we'll have closing statements at the end. I would like for you to restrain your enthusiasm as much as possible. Now, first, we want to start with opening statements, and the first person and the first opening statement goes to General Wesley Clark.
Well, thank you, Gwen, and I'm really happy to be here. I think it's a very important forum, and I think that you should ask each of the candidates what they stand for. I stand for straight talk to the American people. I'm in favor of Social Security, I'm in favor of Medicare, and I'm in favor of a prescription drug benefit. But I am not in favor of the bill as we've seen it come out of the United States Congress. Now, Gwen, I just want to ask, that applause didn't come out of my minute, did it?
Yes, it did.
All right, let me talk quickly here. That bill doesn't curb the spiraling cost of prescription drugs. This bill is a giveaway to HMOs, and it's going to take 2 or 3 million seniors off their current drug plans. I'm very disappointed that the American Association of Retired People did not oppose this bill.
That's the end of your minute, General. We'll be able to get back to this topic shortly. Congressman Gephardt.
Thank you very much. It's a great honor to be here. My dad was a truck driver. It was the best job he ever had. My mom was a secretary. Neither of them had a chance to graduate from high school. But they taught me my values, and the value they taught me was that we're all tied together, that we have to depend on one another, that we have to take care of one another so that we can all succeed. Medicare and Social Security are the best expressions of that sense of interdependence in this country. If we take care of our senior citizens who paid their taxes and fought our wars, kept our country safe, we're going to be a better country. I will be a president who always understands that we are bound together. As Martin Luther King said, I can't be what I ought to be until you can be what you ought to be. And that's the kind of president I will be. Thank you for letting me be here today.
Thank you. Senator Lieberman.
Thank you, Gwen, and thanks to the AARP for convening this discussion. I'm honored to be here, and I'm particularly honored to be here with my proud-to-be 89-year-old, still feisty after all these years, mother, Marcia Lieberman, who's right out there. Dear friends, when I think of senior citizens, I think of my mom, and I think of my dad, of blessed memory. And I also think of the 5th of the 10 Commandments, which instructs us to honor our fathers and our mothers. That's what we ought to be doing in government. That's why I believe that Social Security is probably the best program created by the federal government in the last century. Why I stood up in 1995 to fight Newt Gingrich when he tried to gut $270 billion out of the Medicare program. Why today I'm fighting for a good prescription drug benefit for seniors under Medicare. And why, as president,
Senator.
I will fight to eliminate those outrageous means tests for qualifying for long-term care. That's my promise to all of you, and most of all, it's my promise to my mom.
Thank you, Senator. Governor Dean.
One of the advantages I have in this race is being a governor, so I'm going to tell you what we did in Vermont. Another advantage I have is I'm a doctor, so I've treated a lot of senior citizens. I know what it's like to work in the Medicare system. The Medicare system is a great system, but it needs a lot of fixing, and it needs a lot of work. Let me tell you what we've done. 1/3 of all our seniors in my state have prescription benefits because we didn't want to wait for Washington to do that. Almost all our children under 18 have health care. All our working poor people have health insurance. We cut 10% of the nursing beds out of our state and use that money to fund home health care because we can take care of twice as many people in their own homes as we can in nursing homes, and they like it better. What I'm committed to doing for the seniors of this country is taking care of every one of them just as if they were my own patients back in my medical practice in Shelburne, Vermont. I really appreciate the opportunity to be here. We're going to have a lively debate, particularly about the bill in Congress. And let me just thank you very, very much for this opportunity. We need a new president because this president has really hurt seniors badly by trying to privatize Medicare and privatize Social Security.
Thank you, Governor. Senator Kerry.
Gwen, thank you. And thank you, ARP, for having us here. I wish ARP had chosen to oppose this bill. And I wish ARP was spending its $7 million to help tell Americans what is wrong. This bill is the indication of what is wrong in America today. Wall Street Journal, a couple days ago, says windfall profits for the pharmaceutical industry of $139 billion. Washington Post yesterday, the drug companies have blunted two threats: the importation of cheaper drugs and rules helping to promote generics to reach you. What's wrong in America today is that we have a president who's in the pocket of the powerful interests, and we deserve a president who's going to stand up and give Americans a real deal, not a raw deal. This president is going to make life tougher for 15 million seniors in America who will pay more, be thrown off of their retiree benefits, or have asset tests that are going to prevent them from being able to get the care they need that they can afford. It's wrong. And it's clear that it's not just there. It's in the energy bill. It's in every single bill in Washington, where powerful moneyed interests are robbing the average Americans of their voices in America, and we deserve a president of the United States who has a record of standing up and fighting against them and for the real people of the United States.
Congressman Gephardt. Senator, I'm sorry, Senator Edwards. Thank you. I'm sorry.
Thank you, Gwen. Well, thank you, Gwen, and thank you all very much for being here. You know, it's so important for those of us who are running for president to lay out very clearly our positive vision for the country. When I decided to run for president, I laid out all my ideas in writing for what I thought needed to be done in this country. It's in this book, which I would love for any of you to have a copy of. You don't have to guess what I'll do as your president. This tells you from day one what I'll do. I'm proud to have gotten my AARP card this past summer when I turned 50. I am not proud of what AARP has done with respect to this prescription drug bill that's now in the United States Congress. It gives billions of dollars to HMOs that could be used to provide prescription drug benefits to people who desperately need it. It doesn't have the cost containment. If you watch what's happened to drug company stocks over the last few days, the lobbyists for drug companies are celebrating. Senator Kerry is right about that. We need a president of the United States who will do what I have done my entire life, stand up to and fight against HMOs, drug companies, and big insurance companies.
Thank you, Senator. Now, after the Now that we've completed opening statements, we want to take up directly the bill that everyone has been talking about on the stage. Not everyone, but mostly everyone has, and everyone will. It's a for those of you who haven't been following it as closely as the people on the stage, it's a $400 billion prescription drug plan included in Medicare. In addition, it includes a premium support pilot program, which would test competition with private health plans, and it would provide tax credits for employers who offer retirees drug coverage. As you've also heard, the AARP officially yesterday announced that they would support this plan and will undertake a $7 million television campaign in order to try to get it passed in Congress. We will be able to see for the first time this morning the advertising campaign, the very first advertising spot, which before it is aired, and see how AARP is making its case, and then ask on the other side the candidates to respond.
For years, AARP has worked with Congress
to add a prescription drug benefit to Medicare.
And finally, a bill is about to be voted on.
While it's not perfect, we know there are millions of Americans
who can't afford to wait for perfect.
They need action now.
This is a good opportunity that will be gone if not approved this year.
That's why AARP supports this bill as a good first step.
And we promise to keep fighting to make your prescription drugs more affordable.
Tell Congress to keep their promise.
First question to Senator Lieberman. Not perfect, a good first step?
Not perfect, too soon to say. More to find out. Look, as the folks said on the screen, there's not a politician in America that hasn't promised prescription drug benefits under Medicare to senior citizens for years and years, but it hasn't happened. And there's some facts about this bill. The fact is that it will provide 10 million senior citizens, more than 80,000 in New Hampshire, who don't have any prescription drug benefits, those benefits. But George Bush couldn't stop there, right? With a good, simple bill that did something good. He had to yield to the right-wingers in the House and do some of the bad things my colleagues have said in this bill. I want to take a few days. I'm not going to give a knee-jerk reflex reaction and say, no way. Today, I'm working with Ted Kennedy and other members of the Senate to see if I can make this better. And look, when you're president, you rarely get big decisions that are all good or all evil. You got to decide what's best. On this one, and on every other big decision that comes to me as president, I promise you this: I will do what I sincerely believe is right. In this case, for America's seniors today and tomorrow, and I will have the guts to stick with it, whether it's politically easy or not.
Thank you, Senator. General Clark, you can continue where you had started before.
I certainly will. I think this bill's a mistake. This bill is a Trojan horse. It gives benefits now. It admits competition against Medicare, designed to undercut Medicare and leave Medicare as the last and least effective insurance option for seniors. It gives bonuses to HMOs, way out of proportion. I think the American people want their representatives and their association to stand up and be counted for senior citizens, and that means rejecting this bill. If we reject it, we'll get a better one. We'll get a bill that gives seniors the prescription coverage they deserve and protects Medicare. That's what we need.
Thank you, General. Congressman Gephardt.
This is a bad bill. It's a Republican bill, therefore it's a bad bill. Worst of all, it was written by the pharmaceutical companies and the HMOs. That's what you need to understand. And what's wrong about AARP coming out for this bill is that they're falling into the trap that's been set by the pharmaceutical companies and the HMOs. They will never do what's right for the people of this country. We got to take this government back. We got to take the Congress back. We got to take the presidency back for the people of this country and not do legislation that's just good for the special interests of this country. That's what I want to do.
Thank you, Congressman. Senator Edwards.
I like that. Republican bill, so it's a bad bill. That's good, Jake. That's very good. It's absolutely true. This bill is another example of what we've seen for years. The drug companies, the insurance companies, and the HMOs have a stranglehold on Washington. General Clark is exactly right. There are billions of dollars in giveaways to HMOs, money that can in fact be used to provide better benefits for seniors. The pharmaceutical companies, they're all for a prescription drug benefit. so long as they can continue to charge whatever they want to charge. It's the most profitable industry in America in the 1990s. They make huge campaign contributions. They have lobbyists swarming the Congress. You cannot move up there without running into one of those people. The truth of the matter is, we need a President of the United States that will stand up for the American people, for seniors, provide a real prescription drug benefit under Medicare, and not fleece the American people in the process with billions of dollars to HMOs and giveaways to drug companies. That's the kind of prescription drug benefit we need in this country.
Thank you, Senator. Governor Dean?
Well, I'd slightly amend Dick Gephardt's statement about it's a Republican bill, therefore it's a bad bill. There are Republicans in New England that still are reasonably moderate, but they're in very short supply, so it probably is absolutely true in Washington. Let me tell you what's the matter with this bill and why I agree with everything that's been said so far. What this bill does is, in addition to increasing drug profits by 38% for the drug companies, what this bill does is it'll help you if you're paying $100 a month, if you're paying $50 a month for your drug benefits. But if you're paying $200 or $300 a month, it cuts you off. So it helps the people who don't need the help, and it cuts you off when you do need the help. And why is that? One, to save money, because the people who need the help need the most help. And two, because the votes are where the people who don't need the most help is. The average senior in this country spends $1,000 a year on drugs. They don't need as much help as the person who spends $3,000, but they get more. And that's why this bill is wrong. It is a giveaway to the drug companies, and it does very little for the seniors of this country.
Governor, thank you. Senator Kerry?
Leadership requires that sometimes you have to resist a little in order to get what's appropriate, to get a lot. This is one of those instances. Why are we limited to $400 billion? Why is it George Bush has created a universe where ARP and others say, oh, we're going to grab the $400 billion? Because he thinks it's more important to give people earning $200,000 a year a tax cut at the expense of this choice for America. Why is it that we're in a situation where this doesn't cut in until 2006? The whole Medicare program was put together in 11 months. Are you telling me that we couldn't pass something this year that gives people a prescription drug benefit this year with all that we have with computers and the virtual world we live in of technology? You bet your boots we could do that. This president is giving in. Yesterday's New York Times told it all. The Karl Rove met on Capitol Hill. Who did he meet with? He didn't meet with the legislators.
Senator.
He met with the lobbyists on Capitol Hill to plot the victory for this bill. We need to stand up and fight for a full Medicare benefit for seniors under Medicare, only under Medicare, and not this competition that is going to raise prices for seniors across the country.
Following up on that, and we'll start with you, General Clark. You don't have a vote in the House or the Senate, but Senator Kerry just suggested there is a way to do this. The $400 billion is not enough, but yet you've got to somehow go to people this year and say, no, we don't think it's enough that you have to pay a $35 deductible and get coverage, a $35 premium and get $275 deductible, get paid at least up to $2,200, get reimbursed 3/4 of your prescription drug costs. How can you go to voters this year and tell them nothing is better than anything?
You can go to voters this year and tell them this is a bad bill, because this bill is not about just this year. And one of the things this election is going to be about, it's going to be about the future of America. It's time to think about where we're going, not for the next election cycle, but where we're going as a nation and what kind of a legacy we're going to leave and what we'll have 5 years and 10 years and 15 years from now. And I think voters are sophisticated enough and intelligent enough to understand those issues, Gwen. And this is a case of gratification now and dismal failure later. This is a Trojan horse bill. It's got provisions in it to undercut Medicare. It's going to take Medicare away from seniors in the near future, and a $35 deductible and a $275 copayment and a few benefits up to the $2,000 is not worth that for this country. And I think if we're honest with the American people, they will see it and understand it and demand that their representatives in the United States Congress come up with a better bill. It's as simple as that.
General?
Say no.
General, Congressman Gephardt, what's a better bill?
Well, what's happening here is this is just a continuation of the same fight we've had with the Republicans for 70 years. 38 years in the case of Medicare and 60 or 70 years in the case of Social Security. The Republicans have always wanted to privatize Social Security and Medicare. That's been their dream. That was the alternative they put up when we took up Social Security and Medicare. What they're doing here is trying to drive seniors out of classical Medicare into HMOs and to privatize the program. Now, we have some differences even on this stage. Governor Dean, 1996, said we should send Medicare to wholly managed care program. I was glad to hear him say today he didn't like this bill. Maybe he doesn't have that view anymore. But we've got to have a candidate up against the president who can argue this in the most effective way. We've got to maintain that this program should not be privatized. Think of turning this over to the private sector and to the tender mercies of the HMOs. That's the wrong thing to do. I will never do that. I will fight that, and I'll fight against George Bush in this election to do that.
Thank you, Congressman. Senator Edwards, what's a good bill?
Well, first of all, I agree with my colleagues about what's wrong with this, and everyone has laid that out. And I also agree that the Republicans and George Bush don't really believe in Social Security, don't really believe in Medicare, because you see every day their efforts to dismantle it. Now the question is, what's better? What should we do? Here's what we should do. We should have a real comprehensive prescription drug benefit under Medicare, and we should keep the cost down to you and other taxpayers by standing up to the drug companies and doing the following. First, cracking down on the price gouging that's going on. Second, allow the reimportation of prescription drugs from Canada, which will create a huge downward price pressure here in this country. It's something we clearly need to do. Third, cracking down on drug company advertising on television. Billions of dollars being spent on television, and you're paying for it. Allowing generics into the market more quickly so that we have more competition to keep down costs. And I might add to all that, we ought to do something about the antitrust exemption that insurance companies have in this country that allows them to keep prices up the way they do for everybody.
Thank you, Senator. Governor Dean, I imagine you might want to respond to what Congressman Gephardt had to say, and also I'm curious about what you think a better bill would be.
Well, I won't respond to what Congressman Gephardt had to say other than holding up this and reminding Congressman Gephardt that I'm the only one up here that's ever taken care of a patient. I have no intention of cutting their health care benefits. But let me just say, I do believe that $400 billion is enough. I don't think we can be honest with American voters and say you can have a blank check for anything, whether it's No Child Left Behind, which turned out to be a disaster. This bill reminds me a little of No Child Left Behind. There are going to be a lot of well-meaning people who vote for this bill and suddenly find out that it's costing seniors a lot more for their drugs than it was before. I think this bill is a disaster. I think to do something is not always the right thing to do if the something is worse than doing nothing. And in this case, in the long run, the something is worse than doing nothing. This bill makes it harder for seniors to get the kind of prescription benefits they need. This bill ultimately will privatize a good piece of Medicare, which will make it more expensive for seniors, because everybody knows that insurance companies are not as efficient as the way Medicare is run today. Medicare should be left alone, and then we should have a real prescription benefit put in by a Democratic president.
Governor. Senator Kerry.
You know, holding up a stethoscope and saying you have no intention of cutting people doesn't in fact mean that you haven't. And as governor, the governor in fact raised prescription drug prices and proposed cutting people on several occasions, 3 to be precise, from prescription drugs. My idea of a good bill is a bill that guarantees that people can afford to have a prescription drug benefit, and it ought to be under Medicare, as I said earlier. This bill leaves a huge hole called a donut. It's a big gap. You're going to pay your premiums, $35 a month. You're going to have a deductible of $275 a month. You have a 25% copay. By the time you get a benefit, you're out of pocket about $1,200, and you get about $1,500 a benefit. Then you're paying your premium all the way up to $5,000, and you get 0 benefit. My idea of a good bill is a bill where there's no hole. You get a benefit all the way. You get something for what you're paying for. You also have to guarantee that we make generic drugs available to people. We have to crack down on the patent abuse of the big drug companies.
Senator.
We need transparency in the pharmacy benefit managers, and we need an attorney general who's not John Ashcroft to enforce the law against those companies in this country.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Lieberman?
Thank you, Gwen. First, I want to say that in case this debate gets really heated, it's great to know that Howard brought his stethoscope with him. I'm very comforted by that. I'll tell you what the best bill would be. The best bill would be full prescription drug benefits for every senior in America under Medicare. No exceptions. No slush fund for the HMOs. You know, in fact, that the Medicare and the VA actually produce health care a lot more efficiently, cost-effectively, than the HMOs do. Tougher controls and allowing reimportation of drugs here. But we don't always get the best. I'll tell you what a good bill was. It was the bill that I supported in the Senate a few months ago that provided pretty good prescription drug benefits under Medicare for a lot of people. I was the only one up here who supported that bill. And I did it for the same reason. I'm not jumping to say I'm going to oppose the one that's there until I learn a little more about this 1,000-plus page bill. Because it would provide Medicare benefits, drug benefits under Medicare to millions of seniors that don't have it now. That's why I supported that bill. Incidentally, most Democrats in the Senate supported that bill led by Teddy Kennedy. And I decided if it's good enough for Teddy, it's good enough for me. And you.
Okay, Senator. Now, we're going to go to the audience questions because we promised we would hear from more than just me. So we'll go to the first question. Victoria Toback, who's with WNDS, is here to help facilitate our questioning.
Thanks, Gwen. Well, our first audience question today comes from, ma'am, can you stand up and introduce yourself?
I'm Dot O'Neill, and I live in Ware. My question is about health insurance, and not just health insurance for seniors, but for everybody. The latest news is that we have over 43 million without health care in the country. And we have employers that struggle every year with health insurance costs. They go up around 20% every year. What would you do to rectify this situation, which is out of control?
Thank you. Senator Kerry, you first.
Thank you for the question. Everybody up here is going to tell you they have a plan to deal with health insurance to some degree. I will get to 97% of all Americans covered within 3 years. All children will be covered immediately. I'm going to make available to every American the same health care plan that senators and congressmen give themselves, thanks to you. Now, what I want to focus on, though, is I'm the only candidate here who has a broad-based approach to cost control that will reduce the current cost of health care to all Americans who get it in the workplace. And I do it by taking all the catastrophic cases out of their risk pool. You're no longer going to pay for it, and your employer won't have to pay for it. And by doing that, we reduce the premiums a minimum of $1,000 per subscriber. We make businesses more competitive by reducing what they have to pay in, and we reduce the cost of health care to all Americans in the workplace. You're right, that's the biggest problem in America today. It's going up and up, copay goes up, deductible, and they can't afford it. So I will bring those 43 million Americans into the system.
Senator.
I will reduce the cost of health care.
Thank you. Senator Lieberman.
Thanks for the question. This is a genuine crisis, and George W. Bush has done nothing about it. In fact, 2 million more Americans don't have health insurance today than when he became president. And it's not just those 43 million. It's the millions of others who have health insurance, but the cost of it is rising every year. And I met a bunch of workers here in New Hampshire said to me that they got a raise last year, but their health insurance premiums went up more than their raise, and they feel like they're going backward. We've got some similarities here. Mine is a practical plan that also creates national health insurance pools, like the ones members of Congress get their insurance from. I put a limit on insurance company profits under those plans. I say, and I'm very proud to say, that an independent observer, Dr. Ken Thorpe of Emory University, evaluated all of our plans, said mine would cover more people at lower per person cost than any of the other plans. I want to make one specific point about seniors. One of the groups that has the hardest time getting affordable health insurance is people 55 who retire too early to qualify for Medicare, pay impossibly high rates. Under my plan, you could buy low-cost health insurance from the same pool that we get ours from. That would be progress.
Thank you, Senator. General Clark.
Everybody has a health care plan, and everybody has experts who will tell you that their health care plan is best. I have the same kind of experts, and they'll tell you my health care plan is best. And here's what I plan to do. We're going to guarantee health insurance coverage for all children in America immediately. And we're going to provide the assistance to the parents to get that coverage if they can't afford it. We're going to take the Federal Employees Health Benefits Program, which members of Congress enjoy, and make that available to every American who can't get health insurance any other way. We're going to, therefore, and we're going to assist Americans to pay for health insurance up to 275% of the poverty level. So people up to $45,000 a year would get some assistance with their health insurance. We're going to emphasize preventive and diagnostic care so we catch diseases early and put the emphasis on wellness. And then we're going to have a comprehensive cost containment system, one that uses all of modern information technology, puts clinicians instead of accountants in charge of determining which regimens are effective, gets rid of public advertising for pharmaceuticals and medicine and makes it scientifically based, and delivers more effective health care for the cost than any other plan.
Thank you, General.
Thank you.
Congressman Gephardt.
Well, my plan, I think, is the boldest plan, and I think it's the best plan. To get it, I've got to get rid of the Bush tax cuts. And I do that because I don't think the Bush tax cuts have worked. I also believe to solve the economic problems, we first have to solve the health care problem. My plan, because of its boldness, is the only plan that helps everybody get health insurance that can never be taken away from you. For instance, my plan helps retirees who've gotten their health care or their Medicare supplementary policy from their employer to be able to keep that coverage. It helps them keep the coverage that they need. One other thing, my plan will help employees be able to get long-term care insurance so that we finally begin to solve this nagging problem that we've had. So my plan helps part-time workers, full-time workers, public employees, retired employees. It helps not-for-profit employees. It helps everybody in this country. When I'm president, we will solve this problem. I'm going to sign the bill at the Harry Truman Library in Independence, Missouri, because he's the first president that really tried to do this. I'm from Missouri. I'm going to show you. I'm going to get this done. Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Edwards.
Joe, I know that you have an expert who thinks your plan is the best, and I really hate to spring this on you in the debate. Your mother thinks I have the best health care plan. Only joking, Mom, only joking.
Let's not.
This is a very serious issue. There are millions of people who have lost their health care coverage while George Bush has been in office. Here's what I would do. First of all, I think everyone on this stage wants to get this country to universal health care. There is one candidate for President of the United States in 2004 who has no health care plan. It's the guy that's in the White House right now. Has no plan, no proposal of any kind. What I would do is I would cover every single child in America the only way we can do it, which is by mandating it, requiring it, 100% coverage, not 97%, not 99%, 100% coverage. Second, cover all our most vulnerable adult populations, including the parents of those kids, people over the age of 55. My time's up. But they were laughing. They were laughing. And do the things necessary to bring down the cost that I talked about earlier. Thank you, Brent.
Governor Dean.
As most of you know, we have the highest percentage of children covered in America. We have a third of our seniors have prescription benefits. What we're going to do is just expand what we already did in Vermont to cover everybody. I know how to do this. We've already done a lot of it. There's one issue I want to talk about, though, that hasn't been covered, and it's important. When I was practicing, I once had a 35-year-old woman come to me with some symptoms that turned out to be diabetes. And her health insurance company dropped her at the end of her re-upping period, and she had no health insurance. We're going to put an end to that. We're going to have guaranteed issues so that if you're 58 years old and you had a history of cancer and heart disease and hypertension, you're going to be guaranteed that you can get insurance. You can't be turned down, and your premium will be exactly the same as a healthy 27-year-old. That is also part of health care reform, and we need to do that as well.
Thank you, Governor. The next question, we'll start with you, Governor Dean, because you didn't take your whole full 60 seconds, and I want to reward you for that. The first wave of baby boomers will turn 65 in 2011, which would theoretically be, if you win election and re-election, be your second term. As president, what would you do to ensure their retirement security?
Actually, I think the retirement security is in pretty good shape in terms of Social Security. It wasn't until Bill Clinton came into the office and turned the economy around and people began to pay more payroll taxes. Social Security is in pretty decent shape. So I wouldn't fool with Social Security, but I would fool with pensions. We need pension reform in this country. We ought not to allow major corporations to run pensions anymore. We've seen what happens with Enron when they do that. We ought to have independent pensions governed by trustees with acceptable investment practices so that no matter what job you hold as you progress through your work career, each one pays money into your pension and you'll be guaranteed a pension at the end. So Social Security is a fine underpinning. Most of you know that it's barely enough to get by on. We've got to have a strong pension system in this country, and that means we've got to get rid of corporate controls of pensions so you can't raid the pension funds on the way to the bankruptcy court, as Enron did in so many other countries under the Bush administration's very lax regulation of corporate pensions.
Thank you. Senator Kerry, same question to you.
Well, I think that Social Security, with very, very minor adjustments conceivably, depending on how the economy moves the next years, will be strong for generations to come, providing we don't elect George Bush to a second term. Because George Bush has made it clear that his second term goal is to privatize Social Security. And what they're doing right now with Medicare is the first step in that effort. That's why this slush fund exists for all these big companies. That's why they're giving them the enticements to push people off of Medicare and into the private sector. So the fundamental choice for us, whether you're a Republican, a Democrat, or an independent, is whether we are going to keep faith with the compact, with the deal that has been in existence since Franklin Roosevelt put it there. It's worked, and we shouldn't monkey with it. I also think it's critical to ask Governor Dean, for instance, because Governor Dean said he thought a number of years ago we should push the retirement age to 70. Now, he backed off of that, but he's now also saying to balance the budget, we ought to slow the rate of growth of Medicare. And I'd like to know, Governor, whether you want to back off of that and not
and he'll
continue
have
to
his
slow the
chance
rate.
in the next round. Senator Lieberman.
First, I want to report that my mother has indicated to me that she thinks my health care plan is the best one of any of the candidates and most cost efficient. Look, Social Security, as I said before, is the best thing the federal government has done in 100 years. It created a floor underneath seniors. Let me give you a stunning statistic. Today in America, there's 10% of the elderly who live under the poverty level. Too high. But if we didn't have Social Security, do you know what that number would be? Half of seniors would live under the poverty level. So we've got to first protect Social Security. And the greatest threat to it is the fiscal irresponsibility of George W. Bush and the Republican Party. Every penny left in that trust fund is taken out after benefits are paid to run the federal government. The best thing that we can do to protect the long-term integrity of Social Security for your generation and the ones to follow, and it's not going to happen automatically, it's going to take leadership, is to knock down the federal deficit every year in the future.
Senator,
and then I'll tell you what else we got to do.
Senator, actually, you're out of time. We'll have to
tell you
the
later
next
what
time.
else we
Thank you. General Clark.
Thanks, Gwen. I've got a plan to knock down the federal deficit every year in the future, and I've discussed it. Social Security is as sound as the U.S. economy is sound. And so what we need to do is we need to restore fiscal responsibility. Our plan would do that. For Americans making $200,000 a year and above, we take back the Bush tax cuts. We'll take a hard look at domestic expenditures. We'll institute pay it as you go. We'll go after corporate loopholes and tax subsidies. And through doing all that, we'll take $2.25 trillion back that we can use for important programs like health insurance and to reduce the deficit. That will make Social Security more sound in the future. And we'll use some of that money right away to go after jobs to jumpstart this economy, and that will also help us. Remember, Social Security is sound, It's as sound as the U.S. economy. And that's why we've got to look at the big picture on this, get George Bush out, and have sound economic leadership in Washington.
Thank you, General. Congressman Gephardt.
This is going to be a huge issue in this campaign. George Bush has said for 4 years that he wants to privatize Social Security, put it into savings accounts, into stock market accounts, and now we've got the scandal on Wall Street. This is a horrible idea. We have to have a candidate who can take him on this and defeat him on the issue. This issue has to be argued every day in this campaign. I will do that. I want to go back to what John Kerry said. Howard Dean in the past has said that we should raise the retirement age of Social Security in order to get the budget straightened out. I don't agree with that. In the mid-90s, Governor Dean argued for a huge cut in Medicare benefits of $270 billion, would have cost the average New Hampshireite $1,900 in cuts in Medicare. I was the Democratic leader. I was fighting against that with all of my might because it was a Republican proposal. They shut the government down to get it done. We defeated them. We need a candidate who can take this fight to them every day. George Bush and the Republicans will wreck these programs if they get the chance. We got to defeat them in the election so they can't do it.
Senator Edwards.
Well, we in fact should strengthen Social Security, and the simplest and best way to do that is to get away from these irresponsible tax cuts for people who make over $200,000 a year. I have a whole group of ideas and a plan about how we get back to fiscal responsibility and restore the strength of Social Security. But let me talk about this in a bigger context. We've had a sea change in America over the last 20 years. We've gone from a place where 20 years ago, middle-class working families were saving money, 10%, 15% of their income. They had financial security. They had a nest egg set aside. No more. Now, not only are they not able to save, they're having a terrible time making ends meet. We have net negative savings, which means basically they're going into debt. So they're sitting one medical emergency or one layoff from going into bankruptcy. So what do we need to do? We need to strengthen those families by helping them save. What I want to do is match what they save dollar for dollar, middle and lower income families, up to $1,000 per family per year, so that we can actually create some wealth for people who don't have wealth, unlike George Bush, who only wants to create more wealth for those who already have it.
Thank you. Now we would like to go back to our audience. Hear another audience question. Victoria Toback.
Our second audience question today comes from
Hiram Cannell from Somersworth, New Hampshire. Hiram Cannell from Somersworth, New Hampshire. Each of you has described a health care plan to improve health insurance coverage for people. Unfortunately, you'll most likely be facing a very hostile Republican Congress. How would you tell us your plan to get your plan enacted? And please don't use a bromide like "I'll fight for it," because I know you all will. Okay. Thank you.
The first question goes to Congressman Gephardt.
First of all, when I'm elected president, I'm going to help bring about a Democratic majority in the House and the Senate so we can more easily get these good things done. But secondly, I believe that I have the ability to work with both Democrats and Republicans to get things like my health care plan done. I'm a good listener. I'm also one who has listened and worked with all kinds of opinions within the Democratic Party and with Republicans. I work with John McCain. I brought John McCain to my office to get campaign reform done. We sat on the phone and called Republican members together to get that bill through the Congress. I'm proud that we were able to do that. There are some, not many, but some moderate, sensible Republicans still in the Congress. And we got to reach out to them and we got to get their support for sensible, common sense ideas to solve the tough problems this country faces.
Thank you,
That's what I'll do.
Senator Edwards.
Thank you. Very, very good question, because all this is meaningless academic discussion if we don't actually do something. If you've got some mother who has no health care coverage, whose child wakes up in the middle of the night sick, she doesn't care what Dick Gephardt's plan is or Wes Clark's plan is. She wants to know what we're going to do for her child today, tomorrow. There are a couple of things you need to know. First, all of us have had to make hard choices. I think I've made the hardest choices. You know, my plan is the most fiscally responsible of anybody on this stage and anybody running on our side. Second, I believe this is a plan that will, in fact, attract some moderate Republican support. Dick's right, there aren't a lot of them left, but I believe we can attract the kind of support to get this plan passed. And third, I have been in Washington long enough. I haven't spent my whole life in politics like some folks on this stage, but I've been in Washington long enough to see what's wrong there and how to get things done. I know what you have to do to work with the Senate and with the House, how to get things accomplished. All this, for the American people, they could care less about the fights that are going on in Washington, D.C. It's I'm almost finished, completely removed from their lives. They want us to actually get something done. I have a plan that will be able to be done.
Thank you. Governor Dean.
In all due respect to Dick Gephardt, who's a very decent person who I worked for president in 1988, Dick, you had 4 terms to bring in a Democratic majority, and you didn't do it. My whole campaign is exactly the opposite of everybody's campaign up here. We have got to bring in new people to this process. What I've done, coming from 0 in the polls in January to where we are today, is work to give the 50% of Americans who don't vote anymore in this country a reason to vote by standing up and being proud to be a Democrat. That is the only chance we have of getting rid of Tom DeLay as the majority leader. I intend to bring in a Democratic Congress because those 3 or 4 million people that we get back into this process who haven't been there because they can't tell the difference between the 2 parties or because they voted for a third party are going to get in. They're going to vote for a Democratic president. They're going to vote for a Democratic Congress. They're going to vote for a Democratic senator, state House of Representatives, state senates. And when they do, we're going to have more votes than George Bush. And this time, the person with the most votes is going to the White House.
Thank you, Governor. Senator Kerry.
Well, I'm glad the governor is reaching out to people. We're all reaching out to people. We're all bringing new people in. But when you want to talk about standing up for democratic principles, Bill Clinton stood up in 1995 when Newt Gingrich tried to shut down the government of the United States over Medicare because they wanted to cut $270 billion from Medicare. And Dick Gephardt and I and others stood there and fought against them, and I'm sorry to tell you that Howard Dean was on the other side of that thinking we should cut that $270 billion. Now, that's just a reality. It's a truth. And I've asked the governor a moment ago, will he now balance the budget by slowing the rate of growth of Medicare, or is he going to back off of what he said in Iowa just last week, that Medicare is available to be cut in order to balance the budget? Now, we ought to get that answer. Now, sir, you deserve an answer on your question. I designed my health care plan precisely so we can learn from the lessons of 1993 and 4 with Clinton, and my plan appeals to the private sector. There's no mandate. It makes business sense for people to make the choices I put in it, and I'll describe it a little further later.
Okay,
Thank you, Gwen.
And you will have an opportunity to answer the question, Governor
Thank
Dean.
you.
Senator Lieberman.
Thanks, Gwen. I was just thinking that hearing what John said about Howard, that Howard may want to put that stethoscope on himself here for a moment or two. Great question. You can make pie-in-the-sky proposals, but unless you can get them done, nobody benefits. Right? That's the truth. And I've got to say that some of my friends up here have made health care proposals that are bigger than the sky. They require raising taxes on the middle class, which is so stressed today, to pay for them. They take more money out of, well, as much money out of the Social Security and Medicare trust funds as the Bush tax cuts do, endangering those funds. My plan is a public-private plan. It'll work, and it'll cover millions of additional people who are not covered now. It leads me to a broader point. George Bush broke a lot of promises he made in 2000. One of the biggest was that he was going to unite, not divide the nation. He was going to change the tone in Washington. My friends, he has yielded so often to the special interest and the ideological extremists that the tone is more divided in Washington than it's been in years and years. I want to bring together people of goodwill from both parties to get something done for you, the people of America.
Thank you,
and
Senator.
I will do it.
General Clark.
Important question. You've seen all of the elements of the answer up here. Number one, it means putting all the issues out in front of the American people so that it's not just a new administration, it's a new Congress. Number two, it means having ideas that people can relate to. Ideas in the center, ideas that appeal to independents, moderate Republicans, as well as what we believe in as Democrats. And number three, it means being able to work together, to pull people together and find compromise, to do agreements that are necessary. I've had the experience of doing it. I've worked in diplomacy, I've worked with heads of state, and I've worked with members of Congress from both parties in important issues around our country. I think if we have the right candidate and get the right issues out there, this is a watershed year in the American political system. We can change American politics. We can bring this party back to be not only the party of the people and Social Security and Medicare, but the party of this country and the party of patriotism. And that's what I'm standing for.
General, thank you very much. The next question would, I believe, give Governor Dean an opportunity to respond to some of the questions that Senator Kerry has raised. In several of these debates, you have all accused each other of flip-flopping on everything from Medicare to abortion rights to gun control to affirmative action, the war in Iraq. And what I want to ask each of you this a little bit differently, which is, what have you changed your mind about during your time in public life and over these years, and what led you to that? Senator Edwards first.
Oh, you start with me with the hardest question.
It's because you kept running over time.
Well, you know, I think when I went to Washington years ago, I believed that the way things operated there could actually get to the result we needed to achieve. And when I arrived there, I saw things were actually worse than any of you could possibly imagine. You can't move in that place without bumping into lobbyists. The very lobbyists who are lobbying the Congress that night are having fundraising receptions all over town for the very people they've just been lobbying. I mean, think about that. You've got your representatives walking to the Congress to vote. They're being lobbied constantly by people, and these are the very same people who that night are raising money for them. I think if we're going to, what I believe is, if we're going to change this system in a way that will work for you and work for the American people, McCain-Feingold is not enough. We have to actually get money out of politics by having real public financing and free broadcast time so that the voices of the American people are heard again instead of the voices of special interests.
Thank you, Senator. Governor Dean.
Well, first, let me answer John and Dick's questions. They started out calling me George McGovern. I was too liberal to win. Lately, they've been calling me Newt Gingrich and Rush Limbaugh, and even Dick, I think, suggested I was like George Bush, which is really a cardinal sin to suggest that. The truth is, I said in an op-ed in the Des Moines Register about a month ago that Medicare was off the table, that wasn't going to be cut in order to balance the budget. The truth is, I did not side with Newt Gingrich, although there was a Senate budget proposal, some of which was then signed into law by Bill Clinton 2 years later, which actually provided some drug benefits because it allowed seniors to join HMOs and get drug benefits, and some of you are probably in some of those HMOs today. The biggest switch that I think I've made in this presidential campaign, or as a result of the presidential campaign, is on the issue of free trade. I supported NAFTA and the WTO because my state did well under it. We'd lost most of our machine tool industry anyway. When I went to the Midwest, I was shocked by how many jobs had left as a result of the fact that we've globalized our protections for businesses and for corporations, but we have not globalized protections for workers and human rights and environmental rights. And that we're going to have to do if trade is ever going to work again.
Thank you, Governor. Okay, Senator Kerry, what have you changed your mind about? Maybe the war?
When I began in politics back in the 1960s under President Kennedy's extraordinary sort of inspiration, I think all of us had a much stronger sense that Washington had solutions, that the government based in Washington had the ability to be able to provide a solution to a problem. I have changed dramatically in that through the years. And the more we can send power back to local communities, the more we can empower people locally. And there's been an enormous transition in our country in the last 25 years. Governors and state governments and local governments are far more sophisticated and far more capable than they were 30 and 40 years ago. So there's a very different model today. And I think this president doesn't understand that, because he's not leveraging the ability of local communities to be able to do the things they know how to do with respect to water treatment facilities or schools or after-school programs or seniors, a host of things. I want to empower those communities, and I think the more we can have a government that does that, the better off we're going to be.
Senator, thank you. Senator Lieberman.
Thanks, Gwen. I'm just thinking in this audience that I probably don't have to make the argument that the older you get, the wiser you become, right? And what you do learn is that to err is human. And it shows strength as a leader if you admit that you made mistakes. The other thing you learn as you go on, and I've been in public service now for more than 3 decades, is that, as I said in an earlier part of the debate about the prescription drug benefit plan now up in Congress, sometimes it pays to just take a few days, talk to people on both sides, think about it, and then make a decision that you can stick with because you believe in it one way or the other. I'll tell you the biggest change I've made takes me back a ways. When I first started in public service as a state senator, I believed that it was more important to, if I can state it simplistically, to protect the rights of criminals than the rights of those who were victims of crime. And I saw crime in my neighborhood in New Haven, and I realized that the law has to be tough on criminals. If you show too much mercy to those who are cruel, you're going to end up being cruel to those who deserve mercy.
Senator.
And that's a big change in my career, tough on law enforcement.
Thank you. General Clark.
Well, Gwen, I think by your definition, I've been in public service longer than anybody. I took the oath at Trophy Point at West Point at the age of 17 in 1962, and John Kennedy was president. And as John Kerry said, we were all inspired by his words. But I grew up in a system of authority. And what I came to realize as time passed and I became more and more experienced and had more and more of this authority is that you don't win the battles at the top. What makes the United States Armed Forces wonderful and the secret for America is the character, the strength, and the quality of ordinary people. Businesses, America, the armed forces, they don't win at the top. They win by training, educating, inspiring, and motivating everybody in the institutions and every American. And so what I've come out of my experience with is a determination that we have to work together to take the motto I grew up with in the United States Armed Forces, which was be all you can be, and challenge Americans. We should become all that we can become, and we'll do it through education, health care, and trust, a sense of community, and bringing us all together to unlock the potential of every boy and girl, man and woman in America.
I can't tell you how hard it is to push around a 4-star general. and as you can tell, it doesn't work. Congressman Gephardt.
Well, first, I want to say I want to return the compliment to Howard. He is also a good and decent person, and he is a great candidate for president, and he was a good governor of Vermont. And if he wins this nomination, I'm going to do everything I can to help him beat George Bush. I don't think he is, but I want to rejoin here for a second because he brought up the '97 Act that passed the Congress with President Clinton's support. I wasn't for that either. And I think this shows a real disagreement on this subject. We had the '95 proposal, which would have devastated Medicare, and the Senate proposal that Howard supported was the $270 billion cut. But then, a couple years later, with the president's support, the Congress unfortunately passed a $115 billion cut in Medicare. We've now made 3 restorations because of the damage that cut did to Medicare.
Congressman.
This is a very important issue. Medicare cannot be destroyed by the actions and the misactions of this Congress and whoever is the next president.
Thank you, Congressman. As you can tell, I can ask the questions, but I can't guarantee the answers. So we're going to move on. We have one more question, and then we'll go back to another audience question, and another question from me, that is. 2 of the folks on the stage, Senator Kerry, Governor Dean, you have opted since the last time you all gathered together to opt out of the federal public financing system and to run your campaigns basically without limits, at least for the short term and perhaps the long term as well. I wonder whether you, who have decided not to abide by those limits, whether you think that may be the death knell of the campaign finance post-Watergate reforms, and for those of you who have decided to stay within those limits or who haven't decided yet, why you should bother, starting with Governor Dean.
The death knell for the campaign finance reform was in 2000 when George Bush went outside the system and raised over $100 million. Now he's going to raise $200 million. We looked at where we are. We've raised an enormous amount of money in small donations. The average gift is $77. We believe we can get 2 million people in this country to give us $100 apiece, given the enormous grassroots network that we've built up. That's the way to beat George Bush. You can't beat George Bush inside the public financing cap because all you get is $45 million total. You can't beat a guy with $200 million who's the President of the United States if you confine your spending to $45 million. There isn't one person on this stage who doesn't agree with the goal that we're all here for. We must remove George Bush from the White House, and we're going to do whatever we can do. We can get 2 million people to give us $100. We're going to beat George Bush.
Senator Kerry.
Well, I wish Governor Dean had opted to stay in, and I challenged him to do so. And I said I would stay in if he stayed in. But he decided to go out based on this judgment about President Bush. I've been a campaign finance reform advocate all my life. I'm the only person in the United States Senate today who's been elected 4 times who voluntarily has refused to take political action committee money in any of my races for the Senate. The only people who've elected me are individual Americans who've contributed to my campaign. Now, I'm proud of that. Paul Wellstone and I wrote the Clean Elections Law. I personally wrote a federal matching system for all of the congressional elections in this country. I have tried to live by the strength of campaign finance reform because the greatest problem in America today is the theft of our own democracy by these powerful moneyed interests that are stealing everyone's voice here and are setting the agenda of the country according to the money. We have to change it, and as President of the United States, I will use all the power of the bully pulpit to change it.
Senator Lieberman.
I truly regret that Howard and John have broken out of the limited spending system. The fact is, it is another change of position by Howard Dean, because he said earlier in the year that if any one of us broke out of the system, he would make a big issue out of it. But the more important point is that these laws were put in after Watergate. They've just been strengthened by John McCain and Russ Feingold and a lot of us who fought to limit the influence of money in politics. So I regret that my 2 colleagues have made this decision, undercuts those laws and those goals. But I want to share this confidence with you. I don't care how much money George Bush raises in this campaign. The power of every one of you to come out and vote and say what you think is right for the future of America and get this guy out of the White House and get one of us in there is more powerful than any of the big money that Bush or my 2 friends put into this campaign. We, the people, one by one, as Jefferson promised us in the Declaration of Independence, can make America's future better and safer by changing the current leadership of America. Let's do it together.
Thank you, Senator. General Clark.
Gwen, I'm a supporter of campaign finance, and I believe in public financing of elections, and I'm not breaking the spending cap, but it's for pragmatic reasons because I simply don't have that much money. I'm late in the race. We're raising a lot of money, but we're not there where Howard is yet. And I understand exactly and agree with what Howard has said. Really, it's George W. Bush who has destroyed this system. But I think it's an issue not only of where the money comes from, but how much you spend. And I think it would be a very good principle if all of us on this stage and the others who are in this race agreed we weren't going to exceed the spending caps in the public finance law for New Hampshire. I think we ought to have a level playing field. I think everybody ought to play it even. And then those who've got more money should use it at the end against George W. Bush if they become the eventual candidate. I think that's the principle that all of us in the Democratic Party ought to believe in, that it's the ideas, it's the issues, it's the character, it's not the money that ought to determine elections.
Congressman Gephardt.
I agree with what Wes Clark just said. I think there's a very clear way for both Howard and John to make an agreement that they will voluntarily keep the state spending caps but still wish to break out of the public financing so they can go up against George Bush. That's what they're saying they want to do. They can do both. They can keep the state spending caps and break out to take on George Bush. And I think that's an important thing because of this. The Democratic Party needs to stand for campaign reform. We have got to change people's perception in this country that money is power and money controls the decisions that are made in the Congress and in the country. We are destroying people's faith and belief in this democracy. If we lose that, we lose the country. And the Democratic Party has got to stand tall for campaign reform and getting this money out of politics. George Bush is running around the country while we're at war, having $1 million, $2 million fundraisers with all the special interests. This is an abomination, and we need to stand against it every day.
Senator Edwards. Please. Senator Edwards.
Well, first of all, I'm the only person on this stage who's never taken a dime from either a PAC or a Washington lobbyist, who all of us have talked about. But other candidates up here have taken money from these Washington lobbyists. We shouldn't take money from them. We ought to ban it. I want to say something, though, about what Governor Dean said just a minute ago. What about just standing up for what you believe in, for what you think is right? I mean, do we plan to beat George Bush by being like him, by trying to be more competitive, by going outside a public finance system that Democrats have always believed in and stood for? You know, maybe I'm naive. I hope I'm not. I don't believe the voters here in New Hampshire can be bought. You know, I've spent some time here. I've heard what people have to say. I think you're going to listen to what every one of us believe in, what our ideas are. You're going to judge us based on our character and our leadership and our vision for this country. I don't think anybody is going to be successful here in the state of New Hampshire, nor anywhere else, by spending more money than these other candidates, nor by trying to match what George Bush is doing. What George Bush is doing is wrong. We should not be imitating and emulating what George Bush did in 2000.
Thank you, Senator. Victoria, question from the audience.
And here with our next question is Nancy Fisher from Laconia, New Hampshire. I'm going back to the money end again. I'm very, very concerned about the national debt and this huge deficit that's facing us. And I'm wondering you've mentioned it a little bit, but all of you also have plans that are going to cost quite a bit. So I'm wondering, how can you do everything you want to do and cut back on that debt?
Good question. Senator Kerry, you get to answer it first.
Nancy, that's a great question, very appropriate. I have pledged that I will do precisely what Bill Clinton did. I'm going to cut the deficit in half in 4 years. I have a difference in how I approach it from Governor Dean and Dick Gebhardt. They want to get rid of the entire tax cuts that have been put in place in the last few years. I don't, because some of those tax cuts represent Democrat values that we fought for that helped the middle class. Bill Clinton didn't balance the budget on the backs of the middle class, and I don't want to either. I don't want to get rid of the child care credit. I don't want to put back in place the marriage penalty. So in America, if you get married, you pay an additional tax. I don't want to get rid of the 10% bracket, so you start paying at 15%. Now, we can balance the budget and be fiscally responsible in America. We proved that in the 1990s. And I'm going to do exactly what we did then, and I have enough money for my health care, for education, by rolling back the high end, the wealthy tax cut of people $200,000 and more, and I'm going to shut the loopholes that are now in 17,000 pages of tax code that reward companies like Tyco that move their address to Bermuda and stick Americans with a $400 million bill. And we're going to shut every single one of those loopholes.
Senator Lieberman.
A very important question, and I thank you for it. There are so many ways. You know, this is not only about numbers, it's about values. It's about the value I grew up with, which is that you're supposed to live within your means, and if you don't, you're going to run into trouble in the long run. That's what's going to happen to America if we don't get back into fiscal balance. John talked about taxes. I want to give you a number that's going to shake you up. Last year, we paid $332 billion, I mean we taxpayers, for interest on the federal deficit, federal debt. And if you break that down to the average American household, $3,100 in taxes, a deficit tax on every American household. That's outrageous. It's wasted money. Didn't pay for drug benefits, homeland security, education of our kids, whatever. I got a plan. First is to take back those high-end Bush tax cuts and use it to pay down the deficit. Second, get the economy going. Check my website, joe2004.com. It'll tell you how I'll do it. Third, spending restraint. You can't have it all. I say we've got to increase spending to the rate of inflation, and if we go beyond that, you got to pay for it. Let's get out of debt and secure the future of our children and grandchildren.
Thank you, Senator. General Clark.
Nancy, good question. For you in the audience, you must be thinking, we all study the same textbooks and read the same things. I'm the newest entrant in the race, and the first question I asked when I assembled my policy advisors, I said, how are we going to deal with this growing federal deficit? How can we afford to do what we need to do for education and health care and homeland security when George W. Bush has no programs, just tax cuts for the wealthy? And so we came up with the plan to take $2.33 trillion back over 10 years. We'll use about half of it to pay for the things America really needs, like health care and education. We'll use the other half to buy down the deficit so we keep the American economy going and growing stronger. I used to teach economics. I've been in business. I'm an investment banker. I know how Wall Street thinks, and I know how economic professors think. Nobody agrees with what George W. Bush has done. And that's why this is the moment for the Democratic Party to stand up for fiscal responsibility. We need it. It's good for America. We've got a plan. It's on my website, clark04.com.
Congressman Gephardt.
I don't have to come here today and say I think I know how to get the budget straightened out, or I hope we know how to do it. We did it. We have proof, evidence. We did it. I led the fight on the floor of the House in 1993 when Bill Clinton became president. We put together a combination of actions. You don't balance budgets by just trying to balance the budget. You balance budgets by getting the economy to grow, by creating jobs, so you have more money coming in and less money going out of the government. That's what my plans do. I've got bold but realistic ideas. My health care plan will create jobs and help put more money in people's pockets than the Bush tax cuts. My energy plan, Apollo 21, will create at least 2 million new jobs in this country in high-tech things like hydrogen, wind, and solar. My other plans on pensions and on research and on education will create jobs. That's the way to get the budget in balance. And I'll just end with this. If you want to live like a Republican, you better vote for the Democrats, because we know how to do this.
Senator Edwards.
Well, first of all, I would not raise taxes on the middle class and on working families. I talked earlier today about the need to strengthen those families. These are the families that are struggling and suffering, having trouble saving, having trouble making ends meet. I think we ought to help them. We ought to help them buy a house. We ought to help them save. We ought to help them invest so that we can, in fact, create some wealth for the great middle class and working families in this country. What I would do specifically to answer your question to help balance the budget is, first, I would stop Bush's tax cuts for people who make over $200,000 a year. Second, I would raise the capital gains rate for those who earn over $300,000 a year. It makes absolutely no sense for a millionaire investor to be paying a lower tax rate on his income than his secretary is paying. This is not the America that you and I believe in, not the America we grew up in. It's George Bush's America. I would also close 4 specific corporate tax loopholes, including one that was mentioned earlier, also the now famous janitor's insurance that allows companies to buy an insurance policy on low-level employees. You pay for the premium through your tax dollars, then they're the beneficiary. These are the kind of things that need to be written out of our tax code.
Thank you, Senator. Governor Dean.
First of all, I think balanced budgets really matter. Second of all, I'm the only person running for president, including George Bush, that has ever had to write and submit a balanced budget. Balanced budgets are not easy. They're about making tough choices. I do disagree with John Kerry on the middle-class tax cut. I maintain there was no middle class tax cut. 1% of the people got $26,000. 60% of the people got an average of $304. Tell me what's happened to your property taxes in this state in the last 2.5 years. Have they gone up more than $304 because the president used that money and didn't fund for tax cuts and didn't fund special education or No Child Left Behind? Tell me what's happened to your kids or your grandchildren's college tuition in the last 2.5 years. What middle class tax cuts? Your health care went up, your tuition went up, your property taxes went up. We have to make tough choices. It turns out that Senator Kerry's plan for health care costs almost like mine. He wants to fully fund special ed, so do I. We want to do the same thing. The reason we didn't hang on to the middle class tax cuts, meager as they were, is because we couldn't balance the budget. And I do not think Democrats can succeed in this race by telling people you can have everything and a tax cut too.
Governor, I have, thank you. We have time for one more question, which is going to have to be 30 seconds each, and then I'm going to ask each of you to prepare a closing statement. And the question is, we've talked today about Social Security and Medicare and health care and the budget and economic issues which are of concern to everybody in this room and the broader membership of AARP and probably the broader membership of people who will be voting for you in these upcoming elections. The question is, and if you can be disciplined about it as you think it through, what is the one thing on these issues that you can identify that makes you different from the other people on this stage? As these folks go to vote and try to decide who did I like the best, what was the one thing that makes me different, not the same, and not just different from the president, but different from each other? I'd like to hear what you'd say, starting with General Clark.
Well, I'm the practical, hands-on, talk the talk, walk the walk leader. I've delivered social services, education, health care, and quality of life throughout my military career. I had 44,000 school children in Europe. I worry about people, and that was part of my job, as well as getting the mission done. So I can deal with legislation, I've dealt with it, I can deal with members of Congress. But most of all, I don't talk about statistics, I talk about people. Because when I think about the statistics, I see people's faces in my office, happy or in tears, as general events and laws passed by others impact on their lives. That's what I will bring to these issues.
Thank you, General. I'm going to remind everybody, 30 seconds on this one. Congressman Gephardt.
I've got the most experience of anybody on this stage in fighting for these programs and these ideas and these values. Medicare, I saved it from the deep cuts in the mid-90s. Social Security, I was on the committee and led the fight in the House to shore up Social Security in the early 80s to get its viability out to 2037. You know, if you were going to a doctor to get your brain operated on, you wouldn't say to him or her, I hope you've never done this operation before. You'd want somebody with experience, who's produced things, who's gotten things done, who's done it before. I've done it before. I can do it better in the future. I want to be your president. I want to save Social Security and Medicare from the Republican knife.
Senator Edwards.
Well, I grew up in the bright light of America. Someone who comes from my background, my grandmother was from a family of sharecroppers. My father worked at a mill all his life, and I was the first person in my family to go to college. Every day in my life, every morning when I wake up, my cause is to stand up and fight in every way I know how for the kind of people that I grew up with and people like them all over this country. You put me on a stage with George W. Bush in 2004, they're going to see the two of us standing beside each other, and they're going to say, John Edwards understands me. He has a vision that recognizes the problems that I have in my life. George Bush has left me behind, and we will win the presidency if we have that kind of candidate, and that candidate is John Edwards.
Governor Dean.
The two things that set me apart. First of all, I'm a governor, and I've done it. Health insurance, long-term care, home care, jobs, that's what the governor's job is, and made tough choices. The second is more important. I can beat George Bush. And the way we're going to beat George Bush is different than what the other folks up here. And they're all good folks, and if I don't get the nomination, believe me, I'm going to support whoever does, because we have to send this guy back to Crawford, Texas. But what we have done is to reach out. We have a network of 500,000 people so far. Over 200,000 people gave us an average of $77 apiece. 1/4 of all the people who gave us money were under 30 years old. We have re-energized this party, made people proud to stand up to be Democrats again, and that's how we're going to beat George Bush.
Senator Kerry.
Actually, the latest poll showed that I am the one person who runs the closest to George Bush, 4 points apart, and I think I have the best chance of beating him. And the reason is this, that I am the one, you know, since Harry Truman, people have talked about health care. All politicians have talked about many of these plans. But I'm the one person here who has a 35-year record of standing up and fighting against those special interests, beginning with the day I came back from Vietnam and stood up against Richard Nixon when we slept on the Mall and demonstrated against a war, and continuing through my work as a prosecutor, as a lieutenant governor, fighting as special interests on acid rain, fighting against Newt Gingrich's destruction of clean air and clean water, leading the fight to stop them from drilling in the Arctic Wildlife Refuge. We need a president who is prepared to stand up and fight against the money and the power that is taking away from every American their voice in our life. And that is the difference.
Senator Lieberman.
One way to look at the choice that Democratic voters have to make in New Hampshire and around the country this year is which one of us will build on the transformation that Bill Clinton brought to the Democratic Party in 1992, and which of us will take us back to before 1992 when we weren't winning too many national elections. I believe I'm that winning candidate. Like Bill Clinton, I believe that campaigns are about new ideas. Like Bill Clinton, I'm the only candidate here who has actually proposed a new tax cut for the middle class, 98% of income taxpayers, fiscal responsibility, strong on defense. Unlike Bill Clinton, I don't come from a place called hope, but I have a lot of hope. And I believe that this campaign is all about giving the American people the confidence, as Clinton did and showed, that America's best days are still ahead of us.
Okay.
That's the kind of president I'll be.
Thank you. And the reason why I try to keep those questions and answers shorter is because now it's time for the closing statements. Everybody gets a chance to speak for a full minute, starting with Congressman Gephardt.
This election is not about any of us. It's about you. It's about all of us. It's about what kind of country this is going to be 5 and 10 and 20 years from now. I think if this president gets reelected, this country is going to be on its knees. It already in many ways is. The economy is being destroyed. Jobs are being lost. We have a foreign policy that has blown off all of our allies, unlike the last 8 or 10 presidents did not do. I think I can beat George Bush. I think I have the best chance to beat George Bush. I have experience. I don't think people are going to turn this over to someone that doesn't have obvious, steady hands, who's dealt with all the issues that we've had to deal with. I've got bold ideas about the future. I've used that experience to shape those ideas. They're bold, but they're feasible. They're realistic. I can get them done. I can get them through the Congress and make them happen. And finally, I can beat George Bush where we got to beat him. You got to beat him in the Midwest. You got to beat him in Missouri and Illinois and Pennsylvania, Michigan, Ohio, West Virginia. You got to ask yourself, who has the best chance to defeat him in those states? I believe I can do it, and I believe I've got the right values. We are tied together. We are interdependent. We got to depend on one another, and that's the kind of president I will be every day on every issue.
Thank you, Congressman Gephardt. General Clark.
This is a golden moment in American history. The American people don't yet realize it. It's the end of an era. It's the end of an era of Newt Gingrich and hard, radical Republican thought. It's the end of an era that saw America as a bully in the world, able to go out and use its military to knock off states. It's the end of an era in which people didn't believe in each other, in which the passions of Vietnam continued to divide American politics. It's the end of an era if we will recognize it and grasp it and move forward beyond this point. This is a time the Democratic Party can move out and put America back together. We can reclaim the mantle of patriotism and public service. We can stand up for the young men and women who are fighting in Iraq and still recognize that Iraq is a mess. We shouldn't have done it, and we've got to get out of it. And with my leadership, we will. We can look at this economy and recognize that this economy is a mess. It needs visionary leadership and bold programs that directly address the problems: jobs, health care, and education.
Thank you, General.
With my leadership, we can address those problems, and we will. I want your support to claim this golden moment for America.
Thank you, General. Senator Kerry.
I lost both of my parents in the last 2 years, and they were greatest generation folks. They taught me that my responsibility, our responsibility as a generation, is to live up to their challenge. It's time for us to ask what the historians are going to write about our generation. We are at war, and the entire world is looking to us for leadership, real leadership. I've spent a lifetime fighting on these issues, showing leadership in international affairs, in military affairs, and in domestic affairs. The job of the presidency is CEO of Domestic Affairs, Head of State, and Commander-in-Chief. And I believe I am the one candidate running who has shown through all of my career a willingness to challenge and to fight and to take us to a better place. There isn't one of you here who doesn't want to leave this planet of ours in better shape than we found it. But we have a major journey to go on in order to make that happen. We deserve leadership that is as good in its hopes and aspirations as all of you and as the American people. And I intend to ask us to dream again. The way we're going to beat George Bush is not with any of these sort of plans. It's that we're going to beat him with a vision. We're going to beat him by tapping again into the American spirit that says we can do anything we put our minds to when we are challenged and asked to do it. And I intend to ask us to do that so we leave no child behind, so we leave no American behind, so that we live up to the highest aspirations and standards of this country. Yes, our best days can be there, but only if we offer that vision to our fellow countrymen.
Thank you, Senator Kerry. Senator Lieberman.
Gwen, thank you, and thanks to the AARP, and thanks to my colleagues for a really very good discussion and debate. For me, this caps a great 3-day visit to the Granite State. And one of the highlights of that visit was Sunday, when more than 40 independent, or as you call them up here, undeclared Granite State voters who worked and supported John McCain, worked for and supported John McCain in 2000, announced their endorsement of me because they said they feel supporting my candidacy for president is the best way to continue the fight they began in 2000 for John McCain and against George W. Bush. They told me that they appreciate my support for campaign finance reform, my efforts to stop global warming and protect the environment and protect people's health against environmental pollution, my efforts to close corporate tax loopholes and give a tax break to the hardworking middle class, my bright new ideas for long-term care for seniors, including a $3,000 tax credit for a family caregiver that takes care of an elderly parent. Those are unsung heroes. Those are the kinds of new ideas, values, integrity, independence, and yes, my friends, straight talk that I will bring to the White House on your behalf as the next President of the United States.
Thank you, Senator Lieberman. Governor Dean.
I don't think we can beat George Bush by trying to be a little bit like him. One time or another, every single person on this stage, except for me, supported the invasion in Iraq. One time or another, they all supported some form of tax cuts, which we couldn't afford. Every single person who had a vote voted for No Child Left Behind, which raised everybody's property taxes in New Hampshire and Iowa and all across this country. The way to beat George Bush is to stand up to him and call him out when he's wrong and not to worry about what the polls say. The biggest lie that people like me tell people like you at election time is if you vote for me, I'm going to fix all your problems. Because the truth is that the power to change this country is in your hands, not in mine. Abraham Lincoln said that a government of the people, by the people, and for the people shall not perish from this earth. You have the power to take back this party and make it stand up for itself again and be proud to be Democrats again. You have the power to take back this country so that that flag, the United States of America, no longer belongs to John Ashcroft and Rush Limbaugh, Jerry Falwell. It belongs to every single person in this room. And together we have the power to take back the White House in 2004, and that is exactly what we're going to do. Thank you.
Thank you, Governor. Senator Edwards.
You know, when the American people hear politicians yelling at each other, here's what they know. They know their voices are not being heard. Spend so much time talking about what they're against, you can't even tell what they're for. Everybody is angry at George Bush. We should be, but we can't be just a party of anger. We have to transform that anger and that energy into a positive vision for this country. The truth is that we stand on the edge of greatness right now. We do. It's hard to see because of the damage that George W. Bush has done. But Franklin Roosevelt saw it, and that's why we have Social Security. John Kennedy saw it. It's why we have civil rights. This election is about more than ending the Bush presidency. It's about a new beginning for America. We are the party that believes in lifting people up, not looking down on them. We're the party that believes in bringing people together, not tearing them apart. We believe in an America where the family you're born into and the color of your skin never controls your destiny. And we still believe in an America where the son of a mill worker can beat the son of a president for the White House. That's the America we will fight for in 2004.
Thank you. Thank you all. On behalf of the AARP and on behalf of WNDS Television and PBS, I thank you very much for inviting us into the Granite State once again. We will see you again.